Hello everyone, welcome back to our Shir and Dirshu Bahalacha. We're holding today on Reish Nun Beis Amid Beis, and we are in the middle of Siman Shin Pei Beis. We're up to Sif Yud Ches. Says the Mechaber, Eino Yehudi shehiskir beisai lechaveroi Eino Yehudi. You have a non-Jew who owns a house in the Chutzner, and he rents out his house to another non-Jew. So you have Tony, who owns a house in the Chutzner, and he rents out his house to Vinny. Im nishaloi shum tfisa babayis, if the owner of the house still has a tfisa sabayis, he still retains some level of control over the house that he's renting out. What does that mean? Says the Mechaber, sheyesh loy rishus lahaniach sham shum kelim. If he still has the right to store kelim, to store some sorts of utensils or something inside the house, so that's what we've called previously a tfisa sabayis. He still has some hold over the home. Yecholim liskar mimenu. Then you don't have to go to the party who's renting the house and rent the rishus from him. You could go to the owner of the house. You could go to the one who's renting the house out, and you could be maskir the rishus from him instead of from the non-Jewish party who's actually living in the house. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Samach, sheyesh loy rishus, if the owner of the house has permission to store items in the house that he's renting out, ritzayna loymar. What the Mechaber means to say is, afal pi shaloy hiniach sham. The Mechaber said, sheyesh loy rishus, he has the permission to store something in the house that he's renting out. But it doesn't say that he actually did store something in the house. So the Chavetz Chaim says, Ritzayna loymar, afal pi shaloy hiniach sham, even though he didn't actually store something in the house that he's renting out, but he does have the right to, it still works. That tfisa sabayis creates a situation where we can now be maskir rishus from him, from the owner, instead of from the party that's living there. Vatam, and the reason for this is the loigara mischira ulikita shel nachri, because the owner of the house who retained the right to keep things in the house that he's renting out, he isn't any less than the employee of a non-Jewish homeowner. Hamavur b'Sif Yud Aleph, that we explained previously in Sif Yud Aleph, the lefi sheyesh loy rishus lehishtamesh babayis soichrim mimenu, by schira ulikitai, by the employee of a non-Jewish homeowner. We said you could be maskir rishus from the employee. How? Why could you be maskir rishus from the employee? Because the employee has the right to be mishtamish in the whole house. He has a right of usage in the house, and therefore the Chazal gave him enough of a level of balabatishkeit that you could go to him and you could be maskir rishus from him instead of from the owner. He could rent it out on behalf of the owner. So certainly over here, the owner of the house who retained the right to store things in the house, he's no less than the schira ulikitai. Hi maskir nami, this rentor, the one who owns the house and is renting it out, the yesh loy rishus lehistamish babayis, who retained some level of right to use the house, soichrin mimenu, you're allowed to rent out the house from him instead of renting it out from the party who lives there. Okay, continues the Mechaber. Let's say the owner of the house rented out the house, but he didn't retain a right to store anything in the house. So then it depends. If the owner of the house who's renting out the house has the ability to dismiss the renter from the house, even during the rental period. So in other words, let's say Tony owns the house. Vinny is renting the house from Tony. They agreed that he's going to rent the house for a year. But it doesn't mean that they have a lease that says that Tony could never throw him out. This is just like a gentleman's agreement. Vinny wants to rent the house. Tony told Vinny, listen, I'll rent it to you for a year. But if something happens during the year and I have to throw you out, I'm going to throw you out. So if the owner of the house has the right to throw out the party that's renting the house, even during the agreed upon time period covered by the rental agreement, then Yecholim Liskar Mimenu. Then you could go to the owner of the house and you could be masker rishus from the owner, even though he doesn't live there, even though he rented out the house and somebody else is living there, and even though they agreed that the person renting the house is going to rent it for a year and the year is not up. Since the owner has the right to throw him out, the owner could still rent out the house to you. He could be masker the rishus to you. But if he cannot dismiss the party that's renting the house, Einoi Moil, then renting it from the owner is not effective. Ela imkein yiskeru me'aseicher, you then would have to be masker rishus from the party that's actually renting the house. You wouldn't be able to be masker rishus from the owner. Says the Chavetz Chaim, and it's Katan Samach Aleph, if the owner of the house has the right lesalek haseicher toich zmanoi, to dismiss the party that's renting the house during the time period covered by the rental agreement, kegoin, for example, shehisti imoi, that they made it tonight, they made this condition at the outset of the rental agreement, sherishus biyod elasalkoi calls man sheyirtze. When Tony rented out the house to Vinny, he told Vinny, listen, I'll give you the house for a year, but understand, if something happens within that year, let's say my kid gets married within the year, and I need a place for Tony Jr. and his wife to live, then I might throw you out of the house and I might give it to my kids. So they made this t'nai up front, that the owner of the house retains the right to dismiss the renting party at any time. Then Ois Katan Samach Beis, Yecholim Liskar Mimenu. Then you still could rent out the rishus, you could be masker rishus from the owner. You don't have to go to the party that's renting it. Says the Chavetz Chaim, this is true, Afilu loy silkoi adayin. It doesn't have to be that the owner of the house already threw out the renting party. The renting party is still living there. The rental agreement is still rolling. But since the owner of the house has the right to abrogate the agreement at any time and to dismiss the party that's renting the house at any time, that makes him the balabas, and you can be masker rishus from him. Shaharei shir lo yadayin schus b'chatzeroi, because he still has a very potent schus in this chutzner. He still has a very high level of power in this chutzner. He could throw out the party that's renting his house whenever he wants and come right back. Nevertheless, the Chavetz Chaim points out here, you should understand, Pashut, it is definitely a davar Pashut, it's simple to understand. The chiddush over here that the Mechaber is saying is that you could be masker rishus from the owner, even though the owner doesn't live there, even though the owner rented out the house to somebody else. Still, since he could throw out the party that's renting the house at any time, so now you could be masker rishus from the owner. But definitely you could be masker rishus from the fellow who's renting it. The fellow who's living there, you definitely could be masker rishus from. The chalabayis shaloy achshav, because lamaisa, who's living in the house now? The party that's renting the house. So certainly you could be masker rishus from him. The chiddush that the Mechaber wants to teach you is that you could be masker rishus from the owner, even though the owner is not living in the house. Since he has this right to throw the renting party out, so memela you could rent it from the owner. You could be masker rishus from the owner, but certainly you could be masker rishus from the party who's renting and living in the house. The cause of Beis Yosef, and the Beis Yosef says, even if the one who's renting the house, that's the one who's there. The owner is not there at all. It's the one who rented the house that's there. If you want to go over to the owner of the house, you can rent the rishus, you can be masker rishus from the owner. What the chiddush that the Chavetz Chaim is bringing here from the Beis Yosef is, you shouldn't think that what the Mechaber is telling you over here is a b'di'evet. You might think the Mechaber is telling you like this: Tony rented out the house to Vinny. Really, you should be masker the rishos from Vinny because he's living there. But you have a problem. You can't be masker the rishos from Vinny because Vinny happens to be in Florida right now. So Tony lives next door in the next chutzner, or Tony is a phone call away. So you want to be masker rishos from Tony. So b'di'evet, the Mechaber is telling you, okay, since Lamaisa, Tony can throw Vinny out whenever he wants, you can be masker rishos from Tony. Says the Chavetz Chaim here in the Mishnah Berurah, no, that's not true. This is even lechatchila. Vinny is living in the house. Vinny is right next door. You don't want to deal with Vinny. You would rather deal with Tony than Vinny. The halacha is, since Tony could throw Vinny out whenever he wants, even lechatchila, you could go straight to Tony and you can be masker rishus from Tony. Okay. Says the Ramah, 3 lines from the bottom. Haga. V'hu hadin ish acher sheyesh lo tvisa babayis. The same halacha applies, says the Ramah. It doesn't have to be the owner of the house. Says the Ramah, this halacha is true with anybody who has a tfisas habayis over the Eina Yehudi's house. So in other words, let's say Tony owns the house. Tony rented out the house to Vinny. But Tony also told John that John could store his tools in the house. So John has a tfisas habayis in the house. He's not the owner of the house. He's also not the party that's renting the house. But since he stores his tools in the house, and he can go to the house whenever he wants to go get his tools, so he has a tfisas habayis. If John has a tfisas habayis in Tony's house, then you can be maskir rishus from John. Because again, like the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, since John has a tfisas habayis in the house, he's no less than schira yulekitoi. He's no less than the owner of the house's employee. The same way we said you could rent out, you could be maskir the rishus from an employee, because he has the right to use the house. You could be maskir the rishus from anybody who has a tfisas habayis in the house. So in the case that I just gave you, you could be maskir the rishus from Tony, who's the owner of the house, if he could throw out Vinny whenever he wants. You could be maskir the rishus from Vinny, because he's actually living in the house. And you could be maskir the rishus from John, because he has a tfisas habayis in the house. So again, just to read the words of the Ramah inside, Haga, v'hu adin ish acher sheyesh lo tvisa babayis. This halacha would apply equally to anybody who has a tfisas habayis in the non-Jew's house. It doesn't have to be the owner of the house. Yechaylin liskar mimenu, you could be maskir rishus from him, because somebody who has a tfisas habayis in the house that allows him to use the non-Jew's house is no less than the schira yulekitai, than the employee of the owner of the house. And that we said clearly, that you always have the right to be maskir rishus from the non-Jew's employee who's able to use the house. Says the Chavetz Chaim, and it's cut in Samach Gimel, v'hu adin ish acher, pirush. The explanation of this is, Deloi tema dafka b'masker mahanizeh. Don't think that what the Mechaber is telling you, that it's only by the owner of the house that we say, since he's the owner of the house, and he also has a tfisas habayis in the house, therefore you can be maskir rishus from him, and you don't have to go to the party living in the house. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, the Ramah is coming to tell you not that way. Don't think that this only works by the owner. The maskir is the one who's renting out the house, the owner. Don't think this halacha only applies to him. Because he's the owner, and he retained his rights. So since it's the owner and he has rights, so you could go to him and you can be maskir rishus from him. Kamash Malon, the Ramah is coming to teach you, the Gam Be'ish Acher Mahani, a tfisas habayis works even by somebody who is not the owner. Since he has a right of hishtamshus over the house, since he has the rights to use the non-Jew's house, he has the ability to rent out the rishus of the non-Jew to the other bnei achotzer. The other bnei achotzer could be maskir rishus from him instead of going to the party who's renting it and living there. Ois Cotton Samach Dalid, Sheyesh Loi Tvisa Babayis. This applies to anybody who has a Tvisa Sabayis in the non-Jew's house. V'gam Bozeh Dai B'Sheyesh Loi Rishus Lahaniach, Afilu Im Hadayin Loi Hiniach. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here, that this din is true even if John has the right to put his tools in Tony's house. He asked Tony, can I store my tools in your house? And Tony said, sure, forget about it. Do whatever you want. You want to keep your tools there? Go ahead. So he has the right to do it, but even if he never did it, even if he never actually went and put the tools in the house, it's enough to give him a tfisas habayis if he has the right, he has permission to keep his things in the house. Even if he still, at this point, has not actually put anything there. The Mishnah Berurah says over here that this is like we explained previously in Sif Yud Beis. I have to tell you that I'm a little bit stumped by this line in the Mishnah Berurah, because I simply don't see where it says this in Sif Yud Beis. In Sif Yud Beis, we said a halacha that if the non-Jew, if you don't want to approach if the non-Jew does not want to be maskir rishus to you, you went to the non-Jewish homeowner, you explained to him that you have a problem and you want to be maskir rishus, and he said, no, I don't like this. This sounds like funny business to me. I don't want to rent you my rights in the chutzner. What do? So the Mechaber said, somebody goes ahead and becomes friendly with the non-Jew until the non-Jew gives that person permission to store things in his house. So now he gets a tvisas, a bias in the non-Jew's house. So he becomes like schiroi ulekitai. He becomes like the non-Jew's employee. And now he could go ahead and he could be maskir rishus to you on behalf of the non-Jew, even without the knowledge of the non-Jewish homeowner. That's the halacha that the Mechaber said in Yud Beis. Now, the language that the Mechaber used in Sif Yud Beis was, Ad sheyashaloi rishusai, this guy should become friendly with the non-Jewish homeowner until the non-Jew lends him his rishus, sheyeheloi rishus laniach b'shum davar. So he should have permission to store something in the non-Jew's house. Now, it's true, from the language of the Mechaber, it sounds like he just has to have permission. He doesn't actually have to store anything there. But the Chavetz Chaim did not make that point in the Mishnah Berurah in Sif Yud Beis. And should you tell me that the Mishnah Berurah did not have to make that point because it's self-evident from the words on the Mechaber, I would argue that by reading the words in the Mishnah Berurah in Sif Yud Beis, it actually sounds not that way. Because if you look at Ois Katan Lamed Zayin in the Mishnah Berurah says, the Mechaber said, Lahaniach boi shum davar, the Yid gets permission to keep something in the non-Jew's house. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what does that accomplish? V'koina oisai hamakim, this person now acquires this place in the non-Jew's house by virtue of putting something in the house on Erev Shabbos. Well, that means that he had to put something there. Now the Mishnah Berurah is telling me he doesn't have to put anything there. Now the Mishnah Berurah does say over there that it remains effective even if he removes his things from the house. But he did put something there. Over here, the Mishnah Berurah is saying that you don't even have to put something there. In order to have a tfis sabayis in the non-Jew's house, you just have to have permission to put things there. But you don't have to actually put something there. So I'm a little bit stumped by this Mishnah Berurah. If I'm ayin and I find some nachas, and I can tell you what he's referring to, I will try to report back to you. Okay? That was Ois Katan Samach Daled. Now we go back into the Mechaber, 2 lines from the bottom, on Reish Nun Beis, Amid Beis. We go to Sif Yud Tes. Chotzer, you have a Chotzer, She Yisrael ve'ena Yehudi darim, where there's one Yiddish household and there's one non-Jewish household. Now this is going to be a little bit of an interesting case, so listen carefully. You have a Chotzer. In the Chotzer, the non-Jew has a house in the Chotzer. On one edge of the Chotzer, there's a 2-family house. Let's say a semi-attached house. One side of the semi-attached house opens up into the Chotzer. The front door of that side of the house opens into the Chotzer, and a Yid lives in that part of the semi-attached house. So now, let's stop here for a second. As far as this Chotzer is concerned, there's one Yid and one Goy. Now, we have said already previously at the beginning of Siman Shin Pei Beis that when you have one Yid and one Goy living together in a Chotzer, the Yid does not have to be maskir rishus from the Goy. Why did we say that? Because we said the whole reason you have to be maskir rishus from a Goy is because Chazal did not want you living together with the Goy because they don't want you to learn from the ways of the Goy. But one Yid and one Goy, we don't have to worry. Why? Because it's a milsa deloi shchicha. This will not commonly happen. Why won't it happen? Because one Yid will be afraid to live alone with one guy in a Chotzer, because the guy is chosher hashvichas damim, where he could be a murderer. So the Yid is not going to live alone with the non-Jew in the Chotzer. Oh, so if we look at this Chotzer as is, we say, no problem. There's one Yid, one guy. There's nobody to make it a Ruach Hatzeris with because there's only one Yid. Schirus, we don't need Schirus from the non-Jew. There's only one non-Jew. So far we have no problem. But I told you that the house that the Yid is living in is a 2-family house. It's a semi-attached house. the Yid who lives in this side of the house, his front door opens up onto the chutzner. The Yid who lives in the other side of the semi-attached house, the front door of that house opens up onto a different chutzner. But the interior wall that's between the two sides of this semi-attached house has a window in it that is less than 10 tfachim off the floor of the house, and it's at least dalet al dalet. So there's a window connecting the two sides of the two-family house. Now, because of that window, are you allowed to pass the cholent from one house to the other house in that semi-attached house? No, not unless you make it a Ruvei Chatzeros. So let's say Ruvain lives on one side of the semi-attached house, Shimon lives on the other side of the semi-attached house. They want to be able to pass cholent back and forth. So they want to make it a Ruvei Chatzeros. Fine, beautiful. They make it a Ruvei Chatzeros. Now they could pass cholent from one house to the other house. Ruvain could taste Shimon's cholent, Shimon could taste Ruvain's cholent. Beautiful. Now, really, the other thing that this Ruvei Chatzeros would normally allow is Shimon could take something from his house, he could pass it in to Ruvain's house, he could himself climb through the window and go into Ruvain's house, and now he could take the item that came from his house and he could bring it from Ruvain's house out into the chutzner that's shared with the guy. That normally should not be a problem. Why should that be a problem? Does Ruvain need a Ruvei Chatzeros to take things from his house out to his chutzner? No. He's the only Yid living in his chutzner. And there's one other guy. The guy doesn't answer on him because he's only one Yid. So to go from Ruvain's house to the chutzner is not a problem. To go from Shimon's side of the house to Ruvain's side of the house is not a problem because they made it a Ruvei Chatzeros, Ruvain and Shimon. So once Shimon could take the cholent from his house and bring it into Ruvain's house, really they should be allowed to take the cholent now, bring it out into the chutzner, and eat it in the chutzner. They could even invite Tony over. Now we don't want him to invite Tony over, but really they could. Everybody have a nice picnic together in the chutzner. Says the Mechaber over here that you're not going to be allowed to do that. Now let's see this inside. Now that you understand the case, let's see this inside. Chutzner. You have a chutzner. She-Yisrael ve'ena Yehudi darim ba. Where there's one Yid and one non-Jew living in the chutzner. Ubayis echad shel Yisrael. And then there's another house belonging to a Yid. Eitzel beisoy shel zeh. That's attached to this house that opens into the chutzner with the guy. But this house, ve'enoi pasuach lechutzner. This house does not open up onto the chutzner. This is the other side of the semi-attached house that opens up onto a different chutzner, or it opens up onto Rishus HaRabim. I don't know what it opens up onto, but it does not open up onto the chutzner that's shared with the guy. V'chalonos beineihem, and there are windows between the two sides of the semi-attached house. What's the halacha? Says the Mechaber. Eina yachal la'arev imai derech hachaloin shebeineihem. The Yid who lives in the side of the semi-attached house that does not open up onto the chutzner that's shared with the guy, he cannot make an eruv with the Yid whose house opens up onto the chutzner, kidei lahaitzi kelav derech beis shchenai hapasuach lechutzner. He could make an eruv, Shimon, that's the one whose house does not open up onto the chutzner. Shimon could make an eruv with Ruvain to allow transferring from his side of the house to his side of the house, and vice versa. But what he cannot do, he cannot make an eruv with him. For what purpose? So that he should be able to transfer his kalim, Shimon's kalim, that started off Shabbos in his house, derech beis shchenai, through his neighbor's house, through Ruvain's house, hapasuch lechutzner, that opens up onto the chutzner to take it out to the chutzner. That he cannot do. Now, why can't you do this? So, before we see it inside, in the Mishnah Berurah, I'll just explain to you. The reason you can't do this is as follows. Why is it that when one Yid lives with one guy in a chutzner, you don't have to be masker rishus from the guy? I explained to you that the reason is because Chazal, normally a guy does not aser on a yid. Normally the dira of a guy is not considered a dira. So normally if you have 19 Yiddish households in a chutzner and one guy living in the chutzner, the guy should not make a problem. The 19 people should be able to join in an eruv chatzeros, and tiltal in the chutzner should be mutter. Why is the guy a problem? Because Chazal do not want you living together with the guy. So they wanted to create an awkward situation that you have to go over to Tony and try to explain to him that you have to be masker rishus. He should agree. This is going to become a problem. You're not going to want to live together with a guy. That was the takanas Chazal. They did not make this takana when one yid is living alone with one guy. Why didn't they make the takana? Because they said it's a milsa delay shchicha. Why is it a milsa delay shchicha? Because the yid is not going to want to live alone with a guy. But in this case that we just delineated, the Chazal are afraid that the one yid who's living with the one guy will not be afraid. Why won't he be afraid? Because he's going to say to himself like this: listen, I'm alone with Tony in the chutzner. I'm not alone with Tony with Tony in the chutzner. Listen, I have a window that opens up from my house to Shimon's house, my attached neighbor. Shimon could always come through and he could always be in my house. Not only that, even on Shabbos afternoon, he could bring his cholent into my house and we could go out to the chutzner together. So I'm not alone in the chutzner together with Tony. I have Shimon, who's together with me. Memela, he's not going to be afraid to stay in the chutzner alone with Tony. We don't want that. So to stop that situation from occurring, we said we're not going to allow the Erev to be effective. It'll be effective to transfer between the two semi-attached houses. That's what the Bir Halacha says in Dibra Maskal Kedei Loitzi Kelev Derech L'Chotzer. He says the Erev will be effective to transfer between the two semi-attached houses, but not to allow Shimon to bring something through Ruvain's house out to the chutzner, because we don't want to create a comfortable situation for Ruvain. Now it will not be a comfortable situation, and now we think that Ruvain will want to move out. He won't be comfortable living together with Tony, with the non-Jew, alone in the chutzner. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is going to say. So let's see this inside. Let's go back to Reish Nun Beis Amud Beis. We're near the bottom. In my print, it's 2 lines off the bottom. Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Samachei. So the Lechaber said, what's our case here? You have a chutzner sheYisrael va'akum darinba. You have a chutzner where there's a yid and a guy living together in the chutzner. Ritzayin loymar, what the Lechaber means to say is, Yisrael echad. This is only one yid. We have one yid living together with one guy. Ubayis echad shel Yisrael, and then there's another house of another yid. Ritzayin loymar, what the Lechaber means to say is shel Yisrael sheni. Now we have a house. This is the other side of the semi-attached house that belongs to another Yisrael. And this side of the semi-attached house does not open onto the chutzner that's shared with the guy. Rather, that side of the house opens up onto another chutzner, or maybe onto a mavui. Let's realize right away, if this side of the semi-attached house also opened up onto the chutzner that's shared with the guy, then the case would be that you have 2 yidden living with one guy. Then it would be a pashut din, the tzrichen liskar rishus, that you would have to be masker rishus from the non-Jew, and then the 2 yidden would have to join in a ruva chatzeros. Rak hacha. Only in our case that the Mechaber is explaining, the bayis echad eino shayach lekan, where one of the houses does not open up onto the chutzner, shaharei pischai letzad acher, because the opening of the house is to a different chutzner, is on the other side of the house. V'im kein lo nishar kan rak Yisrael echad b'makam akum. So now we only have one yid together with the guy. We don't have 2. So now really, to carry inside this chutzner, you need no tikkun at all. Ruvain, that's the yid who his side of the house opens up onto the shared chutzner with the guy. Really, to carry from his house into the chutzner, you don't need any tikkun at all. It's one yid and one guy. What's the problem? You don't need any erev, you don't need anything. V'ashmi'in on hacha. What the Mechaber is teaching me over here is, sheYisrael hasheni, that the second yid, that's the one who lives in the side of the house that does not open up onto the shared chutzner. Also, l'taltal derech haloinoi, he cannot take something through the window between the two sides of the house, lebeis Yisrael zeh, to Ruvain's house, that's the side that opens up onto the chutzner, umisham lechutzner, and then to take it from there to the chutzner. So like we said, Shimon cannot take the cholent from his side of the semi-attached house, take it through the window over to Ruvain's house, and then take it from Ruvain's house out to the chutzner. The mishum, I lost the place here. Even though they made it a Ruvei Chatzeros. So like I explained at the outset, really, because they made it a Ruvei Chatzeros, Shimon should be allowed to take his cholent through to Ruvain's house, and from Ruvain's house out to the chutzner. That's what the Mechaber is telling me you're not allowed to do. You could take the cholent from Shimon's house to Ruvain's house, but you cannot take it from Ruvain's house out to the chutzner. Va'afal gav de mishum Yisrael zeh, shemetaltal gam kein derech beisai shal Yisrael, mistaber delay mikri shnayim b'mokam akam lesser. Why should this be usher? Points out the Chavetz Chaim over here. Read these words carefully. Va'afal gav, even though the mishum Yisrael zeh, because of this yid, because of Shimon, who lives in the other side of the semi-attached house that does not open up onto the shared chutzner, shemetaltal gam kein derech beisai shal Yisrael. But now he wants to take something through Ruvain's house out to the chutzner. Mistaber d'loi mikri shnayim b'mokam akam lesar. That does not make the chutzner a chutzner of two yidden and a goy. In other words, what the Chavetz Chaim is telling you over here, the Mechaber told you that this is aser. Now you might think that the reason it's aser is because, wait a second, if you're going to let Shimon take cholent from his house, bring it through Ruvain's house, take it out Ruvain's front door, and bring it out to the chutzner, so now you have two yidden and a goy. Now you have Ruvain, Shimon, and Tony. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that's not true. That's not called two yidden and a goy. The only time we say it's considered two yidden and a goy is when you have two yidden that have doorways that open up onto the chutzner, and a goy that has a doorway opening up onto the chutzner, and you don't have that over here. Over here you have one yid, you have Ruvain, who has a door that opens up onto a chutzner. Shimon does not. Shimon's door does not open up onto the chutzner. What Shimon is doing is, he's going from his house into Ruvain's house, and from there to the chutzner. That does not make two yidden and a goy. Now, the Mishnah Berurah does not explain why that's true, but I think the reason that's true is very simple. Because in the beginning of Siman Shin Pei Beis, what we said is, when did we make the takana that you have to be masker rishus from the goy? When you have two yidden that open up onto a chutzner, and once you have two yidden that open up onto a chutzner, they aser on each other unless they make it a ruvei chatzeros. Now, if you have a goy, they have to be masker rishus from the goy first, and then they can make it a ruvei chatzeros. But the ruvei chatzeros does not work if there's a goy. But over here, there is no ruvei chatzeros. Reuben and Shimon don't aser on each other in the chutzner. Shimon has nothing to do with the chutzner. His house doesn't open up onto the chutzner. So you don't have that situation. You don't have a situation where you have two yidden that aser on each other and a goy. You don't have that. So in that case, the reason that the Mechaber says over here that this is aser is not because this is considered two yidden and a goy. This is not considered two yidden and a goy. So then why is it aser? Continues the Mishnah Berurah. Afilu haki gazru bazami tam acher. The reason this is aser is because they made the gzera for a different reason over here. De'im yehei muter Yisrael pliny letaltal derech beisoy shel zelachatzer. If it would be muter for Shimon to go take things that started out Shabbos in his house and to bring them out to the shared chutzner through Ruvain's house, Yismai cha Yisrael al zeh. Now Ruvain is going to rely on the fact that Shimon is able to come through his house into the chutzner, the yodar im akum. And now he's going to be willing to remain in the chutzner alone with the goy. Delay mistafe, because he's no longer going to be afraid. Mishum shehu yachid. He's not going to be afraid that he's living in a chutzner alone with a guy. Shaharei oid Yisrael achamotzikan. Why should I be afraid? Shimon is always coming through. We're always having picnics in the chutzner on Shabbos afternoon. Shimon always brings his cholent through my house and his herring, and we enjoy it out in the chutzner. So I'm not alone in the chutzner. V'yilmoid mi ma'asav shalakum. And now he's going to live alone in the chutzner with Tony, and he's going to learn from his ways, and that's what we don't want. So again, just to put this in a very short, concise way, normally when there's one yid and one guy in a chutzner, we're not geyser. The reason we're not geyser is because we say that it's not really going to happen, because one yid doesn't want to live alone with one guy in a chutzner. But over here, in this scenario, if we're going to allow Shimon to make an Eruv with Ruvain, because they have windows that go through between their two houses, and we're going to allow Shimon to use that Eruv to go through Ruvain's house out into the chutzner, then it's going to create a situation where Ruvain is no longer afraid to live with the guy alone. He's going to continue living with the guy alone, and he's going to learn from his ways, and that's what we don't want. Okay, now we get a tad more complicated. Now let's go back into the Mechaber on the top line, right by the Ois Cotton Samaches for the Mishnah Berurah. Avol, however, in Pesach Pasuach Beineihem Mutter. Same exact scenario that we just had. Reuven and Shimon have their semi-attached house. Reuven lives on the side that opens up to the shared chutzner with the guy. Shimon lives on the other side. But now, instead of there being a window between the two sides of the semi-attached house, now there's actually a door. Now there's a real bona fide door that goes between the two sides of the semi-attached house. Says the Mechaber, now it's mutter for Shimon to take his cholent through Reuven's house and bring it out to the chutzner. Why? What changed? So let's take a look at the very interesting Mishnah Berurah. Ois Cotton Samaches. Aval im, if there's a doorway between the two sides of the house, mutter, now it's mutter for Shimon to bring things through Reuven's house out to the chutzner. Why? Da'afilu b'loi eruv. Because what did we just say? We said the reason it's usher in the first case is because if it would be mutter, we're going to create a situation where Reuven's not afraid to live alone with the guy. Says the Mechaber over here, if there's a doorway from Shimon's house to Reuven's house, then Reuven is already not afraid to live with the guy. Because if there's mamish a doorway, da'afilu b'loi eruv, lo mistafei Yisrael lador kan yechidi. Now Reuven is already not afraid to live together with Tony alone in the chutzner, even if there's no eruv with Shimon. Shaharei ha-Yisrael matzi tader kan terech bischai. Because there's a door going between Shimon's house and Reuven's house. Forget Shimon bringing the cholent. Shimon is walking through Reuven's house all the time. They're sitting in the learning daf yomi in the chutzner together all the time. It's not that there's a 4x4 window between the two sides of the house. There's a door between the two sides of the house. Shimon is always coming to Reuven. Reuven is always going to Shimon. Like I said, they learn daf yomi outside in the chutzner that they share with the guy together all the time. So Reuven doesn't feel like he's living alone with Tony. So what are you going to accomplish? You're going to say, oh, Shimon, you can't bring the cholent through from Reuven's house to the chutzner. Big deal. That's not going to make Reuven not afraid to live with Tony. Reuven's already not afraid to live with Tony. So there's no point in making a gzeira that the Eru shouldn't be effective. Now, the question that you might ask over here is, if you're telling me that in that scenario, Reuven is not afraid to live in the chutzner together with Tony, so then you can ask the following question. If Reuven's not afraid to live alone with Tony in that case, so why didn't the Chazal say that in that case, Reuven has to be masker rishus from Tony? The whole reason we say when there's one yid and one guy, you don't have to be masker rishus, is because it's a milsa delay shchicha. Why is it a milsa delay shchicha? Because one yid is afraid to live alone with a guy. But you're telling me that in this case, the yid is not afraid to live alone with the guy. So okay, so then make the gzeira that he has to be masker rishus. And I think the answer is because the Chachamim don't make gzeiras that way. The Chachamim don't make the gzeira in this case, in that case. The Chazal make a rule. The rule that the Chazal made was 2 Yidden and 1 guy. When there's two Yidden that aser on each other and there's a guy, then they have to be masker rishus in order for their eruv chatzeros to be effective. If you don't have two Yidden that aser on each other, then there's no concept of schirus. Then you don't need to be masker rishus. Okay? So you're right. In this particular case, you have a very funny case where you taka have one Yid who's not going to be afraid to live alone with one guy. No, it's a problem. But Chazal didn't make their gzeiros in these funny ways. They made broad rules. So I think that would be the answer. Okay. Now, we continue in the Mechaber, 2 lines from the top. But, v'yesh mi sha'omer da'afim pesach basuach b'nei aser. There is an opinion that says, and this seems to be a das of Rashi, but in the Sharet Zion he brings down that the das of Rashi is not a das Yechido over here, that there are others who agree with this as well, the Rabbeinu Yonis and the Yarzerua, the Rashba. So they hold that even if there's a doorway going from Shimon's house to Reuven's house, still it's going to be usher to take the cholent from Shimon's house through Reuven's house out to the Chatzar. V'yesh mi she'omer, and the Mishnah Berurah says, V'yesh lahachmer k'dei azu. Really, we should be machmer, we should rule stringently like this opinion. V'ayin bir halacha. Now, when he sends you to the bir halacha here, in Dibra Maskil k'dei lahitzi kela of derech l'chatzar, I think the key takeaway from this Mishnah, I mean, there's a lot of takeaways from this Bir Halacha, but one key takeaway from this Bir Halacha is what I told you earlier in the shir, that realize that when the Mechaber says that the Eruv is not effective on the top line, realize that what he means is Shimon can't make an Eruv with Ruvain to allow Shimon to bring his kalim or his cholent from his house through Reuven's house to the Chatzar. But from Shimon's house to Reuven's house, that's mutter, as long as they have an Eruv Chatzeres. I see the pesky fly came back there for a minute, so not going to stop the share again and try to get rid of him. I guess this fly wants to learn some dirshu. I don't know what to tell you. Should we go on to the next Sif? No, I think we should try to go ahead. I don't want to continue falling behind. Let's try to do Sif Chaf as well. Says the Mechaber, Chatzar sheYisrael ve'eino Yehudi shruyim ba. Let's say you have a Chatzar that has multiple Yisraelim. Even though it says here in the Mechaber Yisrael, which is Lashon Yachid, he means over here many Yisraelim. So you have a Chatzar over here that, let's say, has 19, it's going to make the case too complicated. You have 3 Yidden living in this Chatzar. Ve'ena Yehudi, and there's also a non-Jew living in the Chatzar, Shruyim ba. Now, the case that the Mechaber is discussing over here is as follows. Let's say we have a multiple family dwelling. We have a 3-family house, 3 families side by side, like a row house. And there are windows that open up from one house to the other to the other. And because of those windows, the 3 families who live in this house, they could make it a Eruv Chatzeres together, so that they should be allowed to carry kalim from one house to the other to the other. So, in this Chatzar, on one side of the Chatzar, let's say, you have this 3-family row house that has the interior windows going from one to the other. Now, each one of these houses also has a front door that opens up onto the Chatzar. So, you have 3 houses that open up onto a Chatzar. On the other side of the Chatzar, you have another house that belongs to Tony, the non-Jew. So in essence, what do you have here? You have here a Chatzar with 3 Yidden and 1 guy. 3 Yidden and 1 guy, if you want to be able to carry from the houses to the Chatzar, what has to happen? Reuven, Shimon, and Levi have to make it a Eruv Chatzeros, and they have to be masker rishus from the guy. Now says the Mechaber like this. Chatzar sheYisrael ve'eino Yehudi shruyim ba. You have this Chatzar that has multiple Yisraelim and a non-Jew living in it. V'hoyu chaloinos psuchais mi beis Yisrael zeh lebeis Yisrael zeh. And it's a situation where the 3 Yidden living in the row house, they have windows that open up from one house to the other. V'asu eruv derech chaloinos. So they got together and they said, you know what? We want to be able to share our cholents. Forget the Chatzar. We want to be able to move our cholents from one house to the other house to the other house. So we want to join in a Reuven Chatzeros. Okay, very good, no problem. Reuven picks up a box of matzah. He gives it to Shimon. He tells Shimon, I am giving you this box of matzahs. Please be mezakeh in it for yourself and for Levi. We make it a Reuven Chatzeros. We put the box of matzahs in one of the houses. We all live together now, and now we can move our cholents back and forth. Says the Mechaber, even though it's now mutter for Reuven, Shimon, and Levi to transfer their cholents from one house to the other through the interior windows that go between their houses, what they cannot do is, Reuven can't take his cholent, go out the front door into the chutzner, go into Shimon's front door into Shimon's house, because now you took the cholent from the house to the chutzner. You can't do that. There's a non-Jew living in the chutzner. It's true that Reuven, Shimon, and Levi joined in the Reuven Chatzeros, but you weren't masker rishus from the Ein Yehudi. So your Reuven Chatzeros doesn't help. It helps that you can move the cholent through the interior window from your house to Shimon's house, and from Shimon's house to Levi's house. That the non-Jew doesn't affect us. But you want to go out to the chutzner? You can't go out to the chutzner mipnei ha'ein Yehudi, because of the non-Jew. Ad sheyaskir, until you're masker rishus from the non-Jew. Now, the Mechaber doesn't spell this out, but it's a davar pashut. Not only can you not take the cholent from Reuven's house, go out Reuven's front door into the chutzner, and then go into Shimon's house, you also can't take a lawn chair out of Reuven's house and put it down in the chutzner. You can't use the chutzner. You can't go from the house to the chutzner. You can't be metaltal, a keli sheshavas babayis, and take it from the house to the chutzner, because you got to be masker rishus from the non-Jew. Now, why would you think that this is mutter? So now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and ayin. You have this chutzner where you have Yidden and Goyim living together at Sinai Loimar. In this case, what the Mechaber means to say is Upischein Shabbat Yisraelim Psuchim L'chutzner. Each one of the three houses of the Yidden have front doorways that go out to the chutzner, and they also have interior windows that go between the houses. Ois Kat Nayin Aleph Eruv Derech Haloinos. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi joined in a Reuven Chatzeros to join their houses so that they should be able to hand off things through the windows. Because they have windows opening up from one house to the other, they're able to make an effective Eruv between the houses. And certainly this would be true if they actually had doorways going from one house to the other. The Mechaber said, even though it's mutter, even though it's going to be mutter for them to move their cholents or anything else from one house to the other between the windows, because they made in a Reuven Chatzeros, and also if they would have actual doorways going between the houses, they would be able to carry their cholents from one house to the other. But they are not allowed to go out from one house into the chutzner and then into the other house. Why would you think this should be mutter? Explains the Mishnah Berurah, I might have thought, since Reuven, Shimon, and Levi joined in a common Reuven Chatzeros by virtue of the fact that their houses open one onto the other with windows or with doors, now yechashvu kebalabayis echad hadar b'chatzer shel akum. Maybe now we should say Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are not viewed as three independent Yidden that live in a chutzner together with a guy. Instead, since they merged in a Reuven Chatzeros, and indeed their Reuven Chatzeros is effective to the extent that it allows them to transfer things between their houses, maybe now we should look at them as one singular entity. They are now one bias, and now it's one Yid living together with with a guy in the chutzner. The ein oiser alav loitzi mibayis labayis afilu derech avera chutzner. Now it should be mutter to go from one house to the other, even going through the chutzner, or to just take something from the house to the chutzner. Kamash malan, that not. Kamash malan, that you're not allowed to do this. Ayin dalad mibayis labayis derech psachim. You're not allowed to go from one house to the other by going through the front door out to the chutzner and then back into the other house. Ritzaner loimer derech avera chutzner, by going out to the chutzner. Dilu derech pesach sheyesh ben bayis labayis mutter al yidei eruv she'asa l'kol hayama. To go from one house to the other is certainly mutter. Now, I want you to understand something over here. In every case where you have multiple yidden living in a chutzner together with a non-goy, let's say the classic case I always give. You have 20 houses in a chutzner. 19 of them are yidden, one of them is a non-Jew, right? So, we always say that you have to be maskir rishus from the guy, and the 19 houses have to join in the eruv chatzeres. We never had a havamina that if the 19 yidden join into an eruv chatzeres, now we should say that they are one entity, and now there's only one Jew and one guy, and they don't aser on each other. We never had that havamina. So why do we have that havamina here? Now we have these three yidden living in connected row houses. They each have a front door going onto the chutzner. Suddenly we have a havamina that if they make it a eruv chatzeres, they should become one yid and one guy, and they shouldn't aser. Why do we have that havamina here? Very simple. Because in the case of the 19 individual houses and the one non-Jewish house, if the 19 Jews make it a eruv chatzeres, how is that eruv chatzeres effective? What does it allow them to do? It didn't allow them to do anything. They're living in 19 separate houses. They make it a eruv chatzeres. They still have to be maskir rishus from the guy. Until they're maskir rishus from the guy, their eruv chatzeres is not matter them to do anything, because they can't go from one house to the other house. They're not connected. They would have to go out to the chutzner, and they can't go out to the chutzner unless they're maskir rishus from the guy. But in our case, the eruv chatzeres that Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi make, it already has an effect, even if they're not maskir rishus from the guy. Because let's say they're never maskir rishus from the guy. Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi's houses are attached by virtue of the interior windows or the interior doorways. So even if they're never maskir rishus from the guy, they could move their cholents back and forth in the interior of their houses through the windows. So their eruv is effective without being maskir rishus. So maybe, since that eruv already has a distinct effect, maybe it unifies them, it makes them one house, and now it's one yid and one guy. Kamash Malan the Mechaber, that's not true. They're not one yid and one guy, they're three yid and one guy, and they have to be maskir rishus from the non-Jew. Okay, we'll have to stop here, but this Ramah that we have left is a very simple Ramah, so it shouldn't take us long to do that tomorrow. Thank you, as usual, so much for listening. Okay, be well.